biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
and whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what stat. What stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the two.
Yes, you can.
Wait, hold on.
An explosive scene developed on the screen as Alyssa Farah Griffin fought back forcefully from Sunny Hostin, breaking the long, repeated premise that Trump's ascent was founded primarily in bigotry. Her inability to embrace that single story shows how deep the splits go among both media circles and the conservative Never Trump movement. The clash signified a shift where strategy and pragmatism are taking importance above ideological purity. The audience could sense the shift as Griffin refused to back down, and the discussion highlighted how much the discourse surrounding Trump had altered. Take a look.
It was the right thing to do, and I've heard a lot of folks on the left coming after Joe and Mika saying, don't normalize him. Well, 75 million plus American voters normalized Donald Trump by making him President-elect Donald Trump. In this notion that if sort of the resistance who opposes him stayed in their safe bubbles, sat on their hands and just complained about him for 4 years, that would have a bigger impact than sitting down. I talked to Mika, actually. They met with him for over 90 minutes. They raised very valid concerns. They both see themselves as opinion journalists who want to actually be able to engage the person that they talk about every day, actually be able to raise issues with them when they're concerned. And in the same way that I thought it was right for Joe Biden to meet with him, and that I think it's right for presidents to meet with foreign adversaries to try to find diplomatic relations and ways to bring people together and solve problems, this is absolutely the right thing. I would sit down with Donald Trump. I would interview Donald Trump. And I'll go a step further. I hope good people work for him. We need to stop demonizing people because they supported a man who just became president of the United States. We should hope good people are around him and smart journalists are challenging.
Look, the bottom line is that America needs a free press that is willing to speak truth to power right now, more than ever. And I think that we have to be very clear-eyed when we think about the president-elect and cover the president-elect. And I don't think you need to sit down for 90 minutes at Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring to be able to speak truth and to be able to cover a story. So maybe they're not journalists in the true sense. Maybe they're saying that they're opinion journalists. But we have to remember that Trump is the guy who ushered in the era of fake news. He is the guy who ushered in alternative facts. He is the guy who attacked 3 black female journalists. He's the guy that revoked Jim Acosta's press credentials for asking him a question. And so I think that this president-elect, I hate to say it, would like nothing more than to have only Fox News cover him, would like nothing more than a state-sponsored media. And I don't think he can be trusted in the way that other presidents can be trusted. This is an aberration.
Alyssa Farah Griffin's shift in perspective has been nothing short of striking. Once known as a sharp critic of Donald Trump, she now emphasizes the importance of engagement over isolation, praising figures like Joe Scarborough and Noy Grinsky for meeting with him. According to Griffin, open dialogue is far more productive than shutting people out. She stressed that Trump's millions of supporters cannot simply be dismissed as fringe voices. Instead, they represent a vital segment of the American electorate that must be understood rather than ignored. This position led to a heated exchange with Sunny Hostin, who firmly maintained that racism and sexism remain central to Trump's political base, backed by demographic breakdowns showing stark divides by race and education. Griffin countered with a different interpretation, highlighting Trump's unexpected gains among Latino voters and other minority groups. In her view, these shifts reveal that many are motivated not only by cultural grievances, but also by economic uncertainty and a longing for stability. The clash revealed a deeper tension in how the upcoming election is framed, through institutional bias versus lived experiences. While Hostin sees systemic prejudice as the driving force, Griffin pushes for pragmatism, communication, and broader understanding, Ultimately, the debate underscored a hard truth. Demonization may fire up divisions, but it cannot build national unity.
As a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, but it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris. It's very clear. I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about this country.
But his whole point is they didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
Black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not, let me just, what stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect.
Yes, you can. There's a lot
Hold on. Calm down, everybody. Just take a breath. Take a breath.
Once hailed as the conscience of modern conservatism, the so-called never-Trumpers are now slipping into near irrelevance. Their outspoken resistance to Donald Trump, while loud and often amplified in mainstream media, never produced the electoral shifts they predicted. Instead, their credibility has withered, their authority shattered, and their audience is dwindling. Caught between two worlds, they find themselves politically homeless. Republican voters see them as disloyal opportunists, while liberals never fully embrace them, viewing their sudden critiques of Trump as too little, too late. The result is a shrinking platform where their commentary resonates with neither base. Media strategists increasingly regard them as negligible voices, and the political establishment has begun quietly recalibrating without them. This decline is not just about individuals, but about a broader realignment of conservative identity. The recent Mar-a-Lago gathering, where influential media figures sat down with Trump, symbolized the new reality. Engagement is now seen as more practical than resistance. Even critics acknowledge that ignoring Trump is no longer an option if one hopes to stay relevant in American politics. On The View, Alyssa Farah Griffin embodies a shift. Once a harsh Trump critic herself, she now urges dialogue, pushing back against liberal colleagues like Sunny Hostin who frame Trump's support primarily through racism and sexism. Griffin points instead to his surprising gains among Latino voters and working-class minorities, arguing that economic anxiety and a hunger for stability also drive his appeal. Her willingness to challenge liberal orthodoxy has fueled speculation that ABC may be seeking a more explicitly pro-Trump, or at least Trump-tolerant, voice on its panel to reflect the political mood. That possibility highlights just how deeply Trump's presence continues to shape not only the Republican Party, but also mainstream media spaces. Together, these trends underscore the resilience of Trump's influence. Whether admired or despised, he remains the gravitational center of American politics. Those who once sought to resist him outright are being forced to adapt, recalibrate, or risk irrelevance. The debate has shifted dramatically. It is no longer about whether Trump dictates the terms of national conversation, but about how his allies and adversaries alike will adjust to his enduring presence. The fading of the Never Trump faction serves as a cautionary tale about political movements built on opposition rather than vision. As the landscape continues to evolve, one question looms large. Can a fractured political culture find a path to unity, or will Trump's staying power continue to deepen the divides?